He could not see them, but he could sense their patient, ancient presence. They were not demons of spite like Nyxar. These were older, simpler things, creatures of primordial cold and hunger, waiting for the misstep, the moment of weakness. He had to keep moving. To stop was to let the cold seep into his bones, to let fear paralyze him. He focused on putting one foot in front of the other, his smith's eyes scanning the ice ahead for patches of dangerous transparency. He had not gone far when he saw the first of the offerings. It was a magnificent sword, lodged point down in the ice. Its hilt was wrought of gold and set with rubies that glowed with an inner fire. It was a king's blade, a hero's weapon. It promised power, security, the means to carve his way through any obstacle. It was exactly the kind of thing a questing hero was supposed to find. Corvin paused. The sword was magnificent. He, a blacksmith, could appreciate the flawless craftsmanship, the perfect temper of the steel. His fingers itched to touch it. He could take it, use it to defend himself against whatever lurked ahead. But something felt wrong. The sword was too convenient. Too obvious. It sat there, gleaming under the starlight, as if placed by a careful hand. A temptation. He remembered Nyxar's offer of the false boots. This felt the same. A shortcut, a deception meant to lead him astray. The true path was not about armed might. The weaver had said the queen valued the courage of the heart. He walked on, leaving the sword behind. As he did, he heard a soft, sibilant sigh from beneath the ice, a sound of disappointment. Farther on, he found a second offering. A chest, overflowing with gold coins and jewels that sparkled with more light than the stars. Wealth beyond the dreams of any village blacksmith. With this, he could build Selena a palace. He could give her every material thing she could ever want. He would never have to swing a hammer again. The temptation was different this time, subtler. It wasn't about power, but about comfort, about providing. It appealed to the humble, practical part of him that wanted to give Selena a safe, easy life. He knelt, reaching out a hand. The gold was cold, lifeless. It was just metal. He thought of the silver rose in his pocket, alive with captured starlight. That had required his skill, his love, his very essence. This treasure was inert. It had cost nothing. It meant nothing. He stood up and walked away. Another sigh from the deep, this one louder, more agitated. The marsh seemed to go on forever. The cold was gnawing at him now, seeping through his cloak and tunic. Fatigue weighed on his limbs. The constant tension of watching the ice, of feeling the things circling below, was exhausting. Doubt began to whisper in his ear. What was he doing? A blacksmith, chasing a fairy tale. He would die out here, frozen and alone, and Selena would never know what happened to him. She would accept Nyxar's offer and be lost to the cold heavens forever. It was in this moment of despair that he saw the third offering. It was not a sword or a treasure chest. It was a simple, wooden spinning wheel, old and worn. And sitting on a stool before it was the ghost of an old woman. She was translucent, her form flickering in the starlight. She was spinning a thread of pure, silver light, and as she spun, she wept silent, frozen tears. "Child," she whispered, her voice the rustle of dry leaves. "Please. Help me." Corvin stopped. This was no grand treasure. This was a plea. "What troubles you, grandmother?" he asked, his voice rough from the cold. "My thread," she wept. "It is the thread of my memory. I must spin it to the end, or I will be forgotten entirely. But I am so tired. My hands are cold. If I stop, I will fade. But if you would but turn the wheel for me, just for a little while, I could rest. I could remember the sun on my face." It was a simple request. A kindness. And it was the most dangerous temptation of all. It appealed not to his ambition or his greed, but to his decency. How could he refuse a helpless old ghost? He looked at her weeping form, at the delicate silver thread. To help her would be a good thing. A noble thing. But the weaver's warning echoed again. "Tread carefully." The marsh tested more than greed. It tested the heart's true motives. He looked closer. The old woman's tears, when they hit the ice, did not freeze. Instead, they sizzled and ate tiny, black holes into the surface. And the thread she was spinning, it smelled of loneliness and regret, a scent designed to pull at the heartstrings. This was not a plea for help. It was a trap. A snare woven from pity. If he sat down to spin, he would never get up. He would spin until he became a ghost himself, another lost soul adding his own thread of regret to the marsh. The courage of the heart was not just about bravery, he realized. It was about discernment. It was about knowing when to help, and when to stay true to your own path. "I am sorry, grandmother," he said, his voice thick with genuine sorrow. "But my path lies elsewhere. I cannot spin your thread." The ghostly woman's face twisted from sorrow into a mask of rage. Her form swelled, the illusion melting away to reveal a gaunt, watery horror with a gaping maw. "You refuse me," it shrieked, its voice now a guttural roar. "Your compassion is as weak as the ice you stand on." It lunged at him, not through the air, but through the ice itself, its body dissolving into a wave of freezing, black water that rushed towards his feet. Corvin did not hesitate. He turned and ran. Not in blind panic, but with the focused desperation of a man who knows the ground is literally giving way beneath him. The ice splintered and cracked behind him, the hungry things below rising to the surface with eager, gulping sounds. He ran, his heart hammering, his breath sawing in his lungs. He did not look back. He focused on a point ahead, a faint, silvery glow on the far edge of the marsh. The chase was a blur of terror and adrenaline. He could feel the cold spray of the black water, hear the snap of monstrous jaws. His muscles burned, and his lungs felt like they were full of shards of glass. But he ran, driven by the image of Selena's face, by the memory of her challenge, by the stubborn starlight in his veins. Just when he felt his legs would give out, his foot hit solid, snowy ground. He stumbled forward, collapsing onto a bank of frozen moss, gasping for air. He turned onto his back, expecting to see the marsh creatures surging onto the land after him. But they were gone. The frozen marsh lay behind him, silent and still once more, as if nothing had happened. The ice had already refrozen, smooth and unbroken. The offerings, the sword, the treasure, the spinning wheel, were gone. It had all been an illusion, a test of the spirit. He had passed. He had resisted power, wealth, and false compassion. He had chosen his own path. As his breathing slowed, he looked at the source of the silvery glow that had guided him. It was a gateway, formed by two ancient trees whose branches intertwined overhead, creating an arch. Through the arch, he could see a path leading upwards, winding its way into mountains that sparkled as if dusted with crushed diamonds. The air coming from the gateway was clean and thin, and it carried a faint, musical chiming sound. He had reached the foothills of the celestial realms. The Queen of Stars was closer. Wearily, he got to his feet. He was cold, tired, and shaken. But he was unharmed, and his resolve was stronger than ever. He adjusted the hammer on his belt and touched the silver rose through his tunic. The hardest part, he feared, was still ahead. The gateway of intertwined trees did not so much open as allow him to pass. As Corvin stepped through the archway, the very quality of the world changed. The oppressive, magical dark of Nyxar's moonless night fell away, replaced by a twilight that was perpetual and serene. The air was thin and carried a scent like ozone and frost flowers. The ground underfoot was not earth or snow, but a soft, resilient moss that glowed with a faint blue luminescence. He was on a path that wound up the side of a mountain, but this was no earthly mountain. Its peaks were not of rock, but of solidified starlight, and waterfalls that cascaded down its cliffs were liquid silver, making no sound as they fell. The chiming he had heard was the sound of the wind passing through crystalline trees, their leaves like shards of polished diamond. This was the periphery of the celestial court. A place of breathtaking beauty, but also of profound stillness. It was a beauty that felt ancient and watchful. Corvin felt smaller than he ever had in his life, a speck of soot and ambition in a realm of pure light. The path led him to a bridge. It was not built of stone or wood, but of a single, shimmering rainbow, frozen in place. It arched over a chasm so deep that looking into it was like looking into the beginning of time. On the far side of the bridge stood gates of mother-of-pearl, iridescent and vast. And before the gates stood a sentinel. The sentinel was tall and androgynous, clad in armor that seemed to be made of shifting constellations. Its helmet was featureless, save for a single, burning point of light where its face should be. It held a spear that was a beam of focused moonlight. It did not move as Corvin approached, but the air around it grew colder. Corvin stopped a respectful distance away. He had no idea what the protocol was for addressing a celestial guard. He bowed, low and slow. "I seek an audience with the Queen of Stars," he said, his voice sounding rough and mortal in the pristine silence. The sentinel's head tilted. The point of light in its helmet fixed on him. A voice spoke, not aloud, but directly into Corvin's mind. It was a voice of cold mathematics and ancient music. "Mortal. Your presence is an anomaly. State your purpose." "I come to present a gift," Corvin said, repeating the weaver's instruction. "And to humbly request a boon. The Queen receives no petitioners. She observes. She spins the destinies of suns. She does not entertain the requests of creatures of clay and brief lives. The Weaver of Dawn said I might earn an audience, Corvin insisted, though his heart was sinking. She said I must present a gift that proves I understand the nature of things. The sentinel was silent for a long moment. The weaver is capricious. But the law is the law. You may present your gift. If it is worthy, the path will open. If it is not, you will be cast into the void between moments. Corvin's mouth went dry. This was it. He had no magnificent jewel, no captured song of a phoenix. All he had were the things he carried, his hammer, his nail, the silver rose, and the skills in his hands. He thought about what the Queen of Stars might value. She who had everything. She who commanded the cosmos. What could a blacksmith offer her? He thought of the frozen marsh. The courage of the heart. The nature of things. And then he knew. He walked to a flat area of the glowing moss near the bridge. He unslung his hammer from his belt. He took the cold iron nail, still humming with a faint resonance from its journey. Then he did the only thing he truly knew how to do. He began to work. There was no forge, no fire. But he did not need them. He called upon the trace of starlight in his own blood. He focused on the memory of creation, on the pride of making something from nothing. He held the nail in his left hand, and with his right, he brought the hammer down. It did not make a loud clang. Instead, it produced a clear, pure note, like a bell being struck. With each blow, a spark of silver light flew from the point of impact. He was not shaping the iron, not in a physical sense. He was shaping its essence. He was forging the idea of the nail. He poured into it his memories, the warmth of his forge, the smell of hot metal, the satisfaction of a well-made hinge. He poured in his journey, the fear in the twisted wood, the temptation in the market, the terror on the marsh. He poured in his love for Selena, a love that was as constant and dependable as the iron in his hand. He worked until sweat beaded on his forehead, until his arms ached. He was not just a blacksmith now, he was a creator, a small god of the anvil, performing a sacrament in this high, silent place. When he was finished, he held not a nail, but a key. It was simple, elegant, wrought of what looked like black iron but which shimmered with an inner light. It was a key that held the essence of making, of journeying, of loving. It was a key that could, perhaps, open a heart as easily as a lock. He held it out to the sentinel. "This is my gift," he said, his voice hoarse. "It is a key forged from a nail. It represents the journey, not the destination. The making, not the made thing. It is a mortal thing, imperfect and striving. But it is true." The sentinel reached out a gauntlet hand and took the key. For a long moment, it was perfectly still. Then, the single point of light in its helmet softened from a piercing white to a gentle, golden glow. "The gift is unexpected," the voice said in his mind, and for the first time, it held a note of something other than absolute cold. It contains humility and ambition in equal measure. It understands that value is not inherent, but bestowed by effort and love. The sentinel stepped aside. The mother-of-pearl gates began to swing inward without a sound, revealing a courtyard paved with night itself, in which pathways of swirling nebulae led to a palace that seemed to be constructed of captured twilight and hope. "You may enter, Maker," the sentinel said. "The queen will see you." Corvin's legs felt weak with relief and awe. He had done it. He had passed the test. He stepped onto the courtyard, and the path of nebulae felt solid beneath his feet, though it swirled with galaxies and the births of stars. He walked towards the palace, his heart thundering in his chest. He was about to meet the Queen of Stars. And he still had no idea how he would ask for her boots. The palace of the Queen of Stars was not a structure of walls and roofs. It was a symphony of light and shadow, a place where rooms were made of captured sunsets and hallways were woven from the paths of comets. Corvin walked in a daze, following a guide that was little more than a wisp of conscious starlight. He passed through galleries where statues of forgotten heroes stood frozen in diamond, and libraries where the books were bound in the leather of extinct constellations and their pages whispered the secrets of dying suns. He was led to a chamber that was open to the void. There was no ceiling, only the infinite tapestry of the cosmos, closer and more brilliant than he had ever seen it. In the center of the chamber, on a throne that was a single, polished fragment of a neutron star, sat the queen. She was neither old nor young. Her beauty was of a scale that was almost terrifying, like looking into the heart of a galaxy. Her hair was a river of night flowing with silver streams, and her eyes held the patient, cold fire of a billion years. She was dressed in a gown that seemed to be the very essence of the color blue, deep and endless. On her feet were the boots. They were more magnificent than any description. They were indeed woven from the fabric of twilight, a soft, dusky gray that shifted with hints of violet and rose. The soles were not silent, but whispered with the echo of every step ever taken on a dream path. The buckles were 2 chips of the first morning, and they glowed with a gentle, hopeful light that promised new beginnings. Corvin fell to one knee, his head bowed. He could not speak. The presence of such majesty stripped him of words, of thought, of everything but all. "Rise, child of earth and ember." Her voice was not a sound. It was a vibration that passed through him, a feeling of cosmic winds and the gentle pull of gravity. It was kind, but it held an immense distance, like a star acknowledging a mote of dust. He rose, his legs trembling. "You have traveled far," the queen said, her gaze upon him like a physical weight. "And you have presented a curious gift. A key. Not to a door or a chest, but to an idea. The idea of becoming. It has been a long time since my court has been offered something so poignant." "Your Majesty," Corvin managed, his voice a dry croak. I thank you for granting me an audience. The sentinel deemed your offering worthy. The law is the law." She leaned forward slightly, and the universe seemed to lean with her. "But tell me, Maker. What brings a creature of fire and forge to my silent halls? What boon could you possibly seek that requires such a journey?" This was the moment. His heart hammered against his ribs. He thought of Selena, of her challenge, of the mocking face of Nyxar. How could he ask this cosmic being for her footwear? It was the height of impertinence. He swallowed, choosing his words with the care of a man assembling a delicate watch. I seek a way to prove my heart to the woman I love. The queen's starlit eyes showed a flicker of interest. Love? A mortal preoccupation. Fierce, brief, and bright. Like a meteor. And how does your love involve my court? She desired a token, Corvin explained. A symbol that I could understand her world, which is touched by the same magic as yours. She asked for the impossible. She asked for the boots from your feet. He expected anger. Dismissal. Instead, the Queen of Stars did something entirely unexpected. She laughed. It was a sound like solar flares and ringing crystal, beautiful and slightly dangerous. My boots, she said, a genuine amusement in her cosmic voice. She has expensive tastes, your mortal love. Does she know what she asks? These are not mere shoes. They are instruments. They allow me to walk the pathways between worlds, to dance on the event horizons of black holes. They are a part of my function. I know, Corvin said, his head bowed again. It is an impossible request. But I had to try. I had to prove that my love was not bound by the possible. The queen was silent for a long time, her gaze turning from him to the star-dusted void beyond her chamber. The demon, Nyxar, she said, her voice now cold. He is the one who stole my moon. He has thrown the lower realms into chaos. His spite is a poison. Corvin looked up, surprised. You know of him? I know of all who disrupt the balance, she said. His quarrel with you is petty, but his act was an affront to the natural order. The moon is not his to take. She turned her gaze back to him, and it was sharper now. You wish for my boots to win your love. But what would you do with them, Smith? Would you truly give them to her? To a mortal girl? The power would likely unravel her. She would become a story, forgotten in a generation. Corvin had not thought of that. He had only thought of the quest, the proof. The reality of the boot's power was a terrifying concept. Selena, unmoored from the earth, lost between stars, it was a nightmare. No, he said, the truth dawning on him. No, I would not. I see that now. It would be a curse, not a gift. The queen nodded, a slow, graceful movement. Wisdom, at last. You have passed another test. You have seen that the object of the quest is not the prize. The quest itself is the prize. The transformation it works upon you. She stood up from her throne. As she did, the very constellations in the room seemed to adjust their positions minutely, paying homage. I will not give you my boots, Corvin the smith. But I will give you something else. She gestured, and from the air beside her throne, she plucked a thread of pure starlight. She walked towards him, her steps making no sound on the nebula path. She was taller than any human, and her presence was overwhelming. Give me your hand. He held out his trembling hand. She did not touch him. Instead, she wove the thread of starlight around his wrist, tying it in an intricate, impossible knot. As she did, he felt a warmth spread up his arm, a feeling of connection, of being, seen by the universe. "This is a thread from the loom of fate," she said. "It is a promise. A marker. It tells the cosmos that you are under my protection. It will not make you invincible. But it will guide you true. And it will allow you to walk one path, one single path, that would otherwise be closed to you." She looked towards the empty sky where her moon should be. Nyxar hides the moon in a pocket of shadow, a place that cannot be found by conventional means. But this thread, it will lead you to what is lost. It will lead you to the moon. Corvin stared at the glowing thread on his wrist. It was not the boots. It was infinitely better. It was a chance to fix what was broken, to restore the balance. To defeat Nyxar not for his own glory, but for the world. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he whispered, his voice filled with reverence. "I will not fail." "See that you do not," the Queen said, her tone gentle but final. "Now go. Your time here is at an end. The demon awaits. And your love is waiting too." She gestured, and a doorway of swirling light appeared beside him. With one last, awestruck bow, Corvin turned and stepped through it. He did not have the boots. But he had a purpose that was larger than himself. He had a thread of starlight on his wrist, and a new destination. He was going to find the moon. The doorway of light did not return Corvin to the celestial court's periphery. It deposited him unceremoniously onto a hard, dark surface that felt like polished obsidian. The serene twilight was gone, replaced by an oppressive, silent blackness. The air was thin and cold, devoid of scent. He was in a place between places, a bubble of nothingness woven by Nyxar's malice. The only light came from two sources, the soft pulse of the silver rose inside his tunic, and the new, more potent glow of the starlight thread around his wrist. He held up his arm. The thread was taut, pulling insistently forward, a silvery fishing line hooked into the unseen. It was pulling him towards the stolen moon. He followed its tug across the featureless plain. There was no sound but the whisper of his own breath and the soft scuff of his boots on the dark glass. Time became meaningless. There was only the pull of the thread and the endless, empty dark. After an eternity, or perhaps only a moment, a shape loomed out of the void. It was a cage, wrought from shadows and solidified fear. And inside the cage, huddled and dim, was the moon. It was not the great, luminous pearl he knew from the sky. Here, trapped and alone, it was diminished, its light muted to a faint, sorrowful gray. It looked like a beautiful creature, sick and captive. Seeing it there, so vulnerable, filled Corvin with a rage that was hotter than any forge fire. This was not just a celestial object, it was a living part of the world's soul, and Nyxar had caged it for a petty grudge. He ran to the cage, his hands outstretched. The bars were cold, so cold they burned his fingers. They were not made of metal, but of pure negativity, doubt, despair, spite. He could not grip them. He could not shake them. "It's no use, Smith," a familiar, oily voice purred from the darkness. Nyxar stepped into the faint penumbra of the moon's captive light. He looked pleased, his hands clasped behind his back. "The cage is made from the unbreakable stuff of mortal weakness. Your own doubts forged these bars. Your fear that you are not good enough for the girl. Your suspicion that this is all a fool's errand. You cannot break it, because a part of you believes it should hold. Corvin glared at him, his fists clenched. Let it go, Nyxar. This has gone far enough. Far enough. Nyxar laughed. We are only just beginning. This was always the true destination of your quest. Not the Star Queen's silly boots. To come here, to see your failure made manifest. To know that you stand before the prize, the very light your beloved misses so dearly, and you are powerless to free it. The demon's smile was a gash of triumph. Now, about that starlight in your blood. The thread on your wrist is a pretty trinket, but it cannot open this lock. Only I can. The trade still stands. Your innate magic for the moon. A simple transaction. The thread on Corvin's wrist pulsed, a gentle, reassuring pressure. The Queen's words echoed in his mind, it will guide you true. He looked from the demon's gloating face to the pathetic, caged moon. He thought of Selena, not as a distant goddess, but as a real woman, feeling the moon's absence as a personal loss. He thought of his village, plunged into chaos. He thought of the courage it had taken to get here. Nyxar was wrong. The cage was not made of his doubts. It was made of the demons. It was made of Nyxar's own pettiness, his insecurity, his need to prove he was more powerful than a simple blacksmith. Corvin was a man who worked with his hands. He understood materials. He knew that the strongest metal could be brittle. And the most cunning trap could have a flaw. He did not address the demon. Instead, he turned his back on Nyxar and walked right up to the cage. He ignored the biting cold of the bars. He looked at the dim moon within. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice soft but firm in the absolute silence. I'm sorry he did this to you. You don't belong in a cage. You belong in the sky, where everyone can see you. Where Selena can see you. He reached into his tunic and pulled out the silver rose. It was glowing more brightly now, responding to the proximity of the moon, its captured starlight singing a silent song of recognition. Nyxar scoffed. Sentimental nonsense. It's a rock in a cage, not a wounded bird. Corvin ignored him. He focused all his will, all his love, all his journey into the rose. He was not a sorcerer. He was a maker. And he would make a key. He held the rose up to the lock of the cage, a complex, twisting knot of darkness. The lock was made of the belief that the cage was unbreakable. But Corvin no longer believed that. A gift that proves you understand the nature of things, he murmured, remembering the Queen's words. He understood the nature of this cage. It was a lie. And the truth was a better key than any metal. He pressed the silver rose against the lock. For a moment, nothing happened. Nyxar began to laugh, a cruel, echoing sound. Then, the starlight thread on Corvin's wrist flared with blinding intensity. A beam of pure, true light shot from the thread, through Corvin, and into the rose. The rose bloomed with a radiance that was both silver and gold, a light that was the very opposite of Nyxar's negative darkness. The light struck the lock. There was no explosion. There was a sound like a sigh of relief. The twisted knot of darkness unraveled, dissolving into harmless mist. The door of the cage swung open. Nyxar's laughter choked off. Impossible. The moon, sensing its freedom, began to brighten. Its gray light turned to silver, then to a brilliant, joyful white. It rose from the floor of the cage, floating gently through the open door. It paused for a moment before Corvin, and he felt a wave of immense, ancient gratitude wash over him. Then, with a speed that defied comprehension, it shot upward, vanishing through the roof of the nothingness pocket, returning to its rightful place in the sky. The cage, its purpose gone, crumbled into dust. The void around them began to shudder. Without the moon as its anchor, Nyxar's pocket dimension was collapsing. No! Nyxar screamed, his form flickering. All his charm, his composure, was gone, replaced by the raw, shrieking fury of a thwarted child. You ruin everything. You miserable, grubbing mortal. He lunged at Corvin, his hands elongating into shadowy claws. But he was not what he was. Stealing the moon had cost him, and his failure was breaking him apart. His form was insubstantial, his attack wild and unfocused. Corvin stood his ground. He didn't have his hammer. He didn't need it. He raised his hand, the one with the starlight thread. The thread blazed. The balance is restored, Nyxar, Corvin said, his voice echoing with an authority that was not entirely his own. Your power here is ended. The demon's claws passed through Corvin harmlessly, like smoke. Nyxar looked at his own dissolving hands, a look of utter disbelief on his face. The collapsing realm was rejecting him. This isn't over, Smith, he shrieked, his voice fading. I am of the night. I will find another way. With a final, impotent snarl, Nyxar dissolved into a wisp of black mist, which was then sucked away into the grinding nothingness of the dying pocket dimension. Corvin was alone. The floor beneath him began to crack. He had freed the moon and banished the demon, but he was about to be lost in the void between worlds. He looked at the starlight thread. It was no longer pulling. It was simply glowing, a steady, calm light. It had done its job. As the darkness swallowed him, the last thing he felt was the thread's gentle warmth, and a sensation of being gently, but firmly, pushed. The push from the starlight thread was not violent. It was like a mother's hand guiding a drowsy child to bed. Corvin felt a sensation of immense, gentle motion, of folding and unfolding, and then the biting, intangible cold of the void was replaced by a familiar, biting cold. The scent of pine needles and wood smoke filled his nostrils. The sound of the wind returned, a natural wind, sighing through real trees. He stumbled and fell to his knees, his hands sinking into deep, powdery snow. He was back. He was in the twisted wood, but it was different. The oppressive, magical darkness was gone. The trees were just trees again, their branches laced with a glittering, honest frost. And above him, through the lattice of bare branches, was the sky. The moon was back. It hung there, full and luminous, its silver light bathing the forest in a serene, blue-white glow. It looked happy. Relieved. Its light was a balm on the world, washing away the last remnants of Nyxar's chaos. The shadows were just shadows again, simple absences of light, holding no whispers, no malice. Corvin took a deep, shuddering breath. The air was clean and cold. He was exhausted, every muscle aching, his mind reeling from the cosmic scale of what he had just experienced. But he was alive. And he had won. He looked at his wrist. The thread from the Queen of Stars was gone. Its work was done. But he could feel a faint, warm residue where it had been, a permanent reminder of his audience in the celestial court. He pushed himself to his feet, his body protesting. He had no idea how long he had been gone. A night? Several days? Time moved strangely in the realms he had visited. All he knew was that he had to get back to the village. He had to see Selena. The journey back through the twisted wood was the reverse of his journey out. Where before the path had been treacherous and hidden, now it seemed clear and welcoming, illuminated by the returned moon. The creatures that had lurked and whispered were silent, perhaps ashamed, perhaps simply returned to their natural states. He walked with a new purpose, no longer a desperate quester, but a man returning home. As he neared the edge of the wood, he saw the warm, welcoming lights of the village ahead. They were not the frantic, bobbing lanterns of panic, but the steady, golden glow of hearth fires from windows. He could hear faint sounds of music and laughter carried on the night air. The midwinter celebrations, delayed by the unnatural night, had finally begun. He stepped out of the tree line and onto the main road. The snow had been trodden into a smooth path by many feet. The village looked peaceful, bathed in the combined light of the moon and its own cozy fires. His first stop was not Selena's house. His feet, of their own accord, carried him to his forge. It stood dark and silent. He pushed the heavy door open. The air inside was cold, the forge fire dead for who knew how long. It smelled of old ash and cold metal. It was the most wonderful smell in the world. It was home. He walked to his anvil, placing a hand on its cold, familiar surface. He was just a blacksmith again. The man who had spoken to the Queen of Stars, who had faced down a demon and freed the moon, felt like a character from a dream. But the exhaustion in his bones was real. The memory was real. He needed to see her. He left the forge and walked through the village lanes. People were out and about, chatting and laughing, their faces relieved and cheerful. They nodded to him as he passed. "Corvin. There you are. Where've you been, lad? You missed the great dark." "And the great return," called out Tomas the miller, his arm linked with his wife Brina, who was actually smiling. "Got lost in the woods," Corvin said, which was true, in its way. He received similar greetings from others. The village had already folded the strange event into its folklore, a tale to be told next Midwinter Eve. The terror was already softening into adventure. He finally reached Selena's house. A light burned in her window. His heart thudded against his ribs. He had no boots to give her. He had nothing but the story of his journey, and the returned moon in the sky. He knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately. Selena stood there, wrapped in a thick shawl. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She had been waiting. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The playful, capricious girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had faced a long, anxious night, wondering if she had sent a man to his death. "You're back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm back," he said. She looked past him, up at the moon, then back at his face. "It's back. Because of you." He nodded, unable to find words. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of awe. "I felt it," she said. "When it returned. It was like a part of me that had gone numb suddenly woke up. I knew you had done it." She stepped aside. "Come in. You look half frozen." He stepped over the threshold into the warm, familiar room. The door closed behind him, shutting out the cold night. He was home. The warmth of Selena's cottage was a physical shock after the cosmic cold of the void and the winter night. The fire in the hearth crackled, painting the room in dancing orange light. The air smelled of dried herbs and baking bread. It was a mortal smell, a human smell, and it grounded Corvin more than anything else could. Selena did not speak. She guided him to a chair by the fire, her touch gentle on his arm. She brought him a mug of spiced wine, steam rising from its surface in fragrant curls. He wrapped his hands around the warm clay, letting the heat seep into his frozen fingers. He sat, and she sat opposite him, her gray eyes fixed on his face, waiting. He did not know where to begin. How could he describe the midwinter market, the frozen marsh, the queen of stars? How could he explain a cage made of doubt and a key made of a rose? The words felt too small, too clumsy. So he started with the only thing that felt real. "I didn't get the boots," he said, his voice rough. A small, sad smile touched Selena's lips. "I know." He looked up, surprised. When the moon returned, she explained softly, "I understood. The boots were just a symbol. A test. I asked for the impossible because I was afraid. Afraid of my own strangeness, afraid that no one from this world could ever understand the part of me that answers to the moon." She looked into the fire. "I thought if you could achieve the impossible, you would understand me. But I was wrong." "How were you wrong?" Corvin asked. She met his gaze again, and her eyes were clear and certain. "You didn't need to bring me the boots to understand. You understood when you decided to try. And you proved it not by bringing me a treasure, but by restoring a balance. You fixed the sky, Corvin. For everyone. Not just for me." She shook her head, a look of shame crossing her features. "My demand was selfish. Your quest was selfless. You are far greater than I ever imagined." He saw the truth then. The journey had changed her as much as it had changed him. The capricious maiden had been tempered by worry and reflection into a woman of depth and compassion. "Tell me," she said, leaning forward. "Tell me everything." And so he did. He told her of the phantom in the wood, the cold iron nail that became a compass. He described the impossible market and the price of a memory. He spoke of the frozen marsh and its terrible temptations, and how the courage to say no was harder than any battle. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, the images becoming clearer in his own mind. When he described the celestial court, the sentinel of constellations, and the queen of stars herself, Selena listened, rapt, her hand pressed to her mouth. She didn't interrupt, her eyes wide with wonder. He told her of the cage of shadows, and Nyxar's fury, and the moment the silver rose, fueled by the queen's thread, had turned the lock to mist. He was so small, Corvin finished, staring into the dregs of his wine. When his power was broken. Just a petty creature, screaming in the dark. I almost felt sorry for him. They sat in silence for a time, the only sound the crackling of the fire. The story hung in the air between them, a shared, incredible truth. Finally, Selena rose from her chair. She knelt before him, there on the hearthrug, and took his work-roughened hands in her soft ones. Her touch sent a jolt through him. "I sent you on an impossible quest to prove your love," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And you returned having proven your character. You are brave, and true, and you have a smith's heart, you see what is broken, and you fix it." She took a deep breath. "I don't need the boots, Corvin. I never did. I only ever needed you." The words washed over him, healing every ache, every fear, every moment of doubt. He had journeyed to the edge of existence and back, and this, here, was his true reward. He reached into his tunic and pulled out the silver rose. It had lost none of its luster. If anything, after its ordeal, it seemed to glow even more brightly, its captured starlight pulsing in time with his heartbeat. "I may not have the Star Queen's boots," he said, his voice soft. "But I made this for you. It's not a thing of power. It's just a thing of me. Of my hands, and my heart." He held it out to her. Selena took it, her fingers closing gently around the stem. As she did, the rose flared with a soft, silver light, illuminating her face. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, catching the light like a diamond. "It's the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," she whispered. "Because it is true." She leaned forward, and in the firelight, with the return moon shining brightly through the window, she kissed him. It was not a dramatic kiss, not a kiss from a storybook. It was a slow, gentle, certain kiss. A kiss of homecoming. A kiss that held the warmth of the hearth, the mystery of the moon, and the promise of a future, built not on impossible quests, but on simple, enduring things. Outside, the village celebrated Midwinter, their voices raised in song and laughter. But inside the cottage, there was a quieter, deeper celebration. The quest was over. The demon was banished. The moon was home. And for the first time, so was Corvin. The midwinter sun, pale and weak but determined, rose over the village, painting the snow in shades of rose and gold. The world had been scrubbed clean. The air was crisp and carried the smell of frost and, from a dozen chimneys, the promise of morning bread. The strange, dark night was already receding into memory, becoming a tale to be embellished over future mugs of ale. In the forge, a fire was burning. Corvin stood before the rekindled hearth, the familiar weight of his hammer a comfort in his hand. He was not working on anything grand. He was mending a pot for old Marta, a simple, homely task. The rhythmic ping of his hammer was a grounding music, a declaration that the world had returned to its rightful axis. The door creaked open, letting in a sliver of cold light and Morwenna. She stood for a moment, watching him work, a rare, unreadable expression on her face. She carried a small basket covered with a cloth. "So. The hero returns to his anvil," she said, her tone dry as ever, but lacking its usual edge of mockery. Corvin looked up and smiled. "It's where I belong, mother." She set the basket on a bench. "Borville sent bread. Still trying to court me with carbohydrates. The man has no imagination." She peered at him, her witch's eyes missing nothing. "You look different. Older. You've got a bit of the far away in your eyes." "I went far away," he said simply. "I know." She paused. "I may have left a compass for you. In the woods." A little motherly nudge. Corvin remembered the sudden, sure pull of the cold iron nail. He nodded. "I felt it. Thank you." It was as close to an admission of affection as they would ever get. Morwenna grunted, apparently satisfied. "Don't let it get about. I have a reputation to maintain." She turned to leave, then stopped. The moon-touched girl. She was at her window all night, waiting. Staring at the sky like she could pull it back with her will. Foolish. But, steadfast. With that, she swept out, leaving behind the scent of herbs and the warmth of the bread. Later that morning, as Corvin was sweeping the snow from his doorstep, he saw a familiar, elegant figure approaching. Lord Varick, the region's nobleman, dressed in furs and looking uncharacteristically flustered, followed by his simpering son. "Smith!" Lord Varick boomed, his breath pluming. "Heard you were about during the incident. Nasty business. The sky going out like a candle. My son here was quite alarmed." The son, a young man with a perfectly trimmed beard and anxious eyes, nodded vigorously. "Thought it was the end of days. Absolutely terrifying." "It was a strange night, my lord," Corvin said noncommittally. "Indeed. Well, it's over now. Back to normal." Lord Varick cleared his throat. "Which brings me to my point. My son has set his sights on the girl, Selina. A rare beauty. A bit odd, but that can be charming. He intends to court her properly. Gifts, poetry, the works. Wanted to give you fair warning. As a local craftsman. So you don't waste your time." He said the last part with a magnanimous wave, as if bestowing a great favor. Corvin leaned on his broom. He looked from the Lord's pompous face to the son's nervous one. He thought of the Queen of Stars, of a cage made of shadows, of a kiss by firelight. He smiled, a slow, easy smile. "You're welcome to try, my lord." Lord Varick blinked, nonplussed by the lack of despair or defiance. Well, good man. Knew you'd see reason." He tugged at his son's sleeve, and they retreated down the lane, already discussing the merits of sonnets versus love ballads. Corvin went back to his sweeping. He felt no jealousy, no fear. The sun could bring all the poetry in the world. He had walked a path of starlight for her. There was no competition. As evening drew in, Corvin walked to Selina's house. He did not go empty-handed, but what he carried was not a grand gesture. It was a new latch for her garden gate, one he had forged that afternoon. It was sturdy and simple, but if you looked closely, you could see he had worked a tiny, swirling pattern into the iron, a pattern that resembled the rings of Saturn. She was waiting for him in the garden, the silver rose pinned to her dress, glowing softly in the twilight. The moon, his moon, was rising behind her, a perfect silver disk. "I heard Lord Varric's son is going to read you poetry," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Selina made a face, a wonderfully unladylike expression of distaste. "He already tried. Something about my eyes being like limpid pools. It was dreadful." She smiled at him, a true, open smile that reached her eyes. "I prefer smiths who fix gates and mend skies." He held up the new latch. "A small thing." "The best things are," she said, taking it from him. Her fingers brushed his, and the familiar jolt passed between them. It was a connection now, not a surprise. A settled fact. Together, they fitted the new latch to the gate. It clicked into place with a satisfying, final sound. It was a promise. A promise of small, daily things. Of a life built together, not on celestial wonders, but on the solid, steady ground of shared understanding. They stood there for a long time, not speaking, watching the moon climb higher in the sky. It was whole again. They were whole. In a distant part of the sky, a shadow flickered. It was a small, petty shadow, nursing a bruised ego and an infinite spite. Nyxar was not gone, not forever. The night is vast, and demons are patient. He would wait. There would be other nights, other opportunities for mischief. But for now, under the watchful eye of a reclaimed moon, in a village at the edge of the world, a blacksmith and a moon-touched girl stood hand in hand. They had faced the dark and found their way back to the light. And in doing so, they had forged a story that would be told long after the silver rose had tarnished and the new latch on the gate had rusted away. A story of how love, humble and true, can mend even the most broken of skies. And in the great, cosmic scheme of things, that is the most powerful magic of all. And so, the tale of the star-forged lover and the moon-touched maiden finds its warm, quiet close. But every story, like a well-tended forge, glows brighter when it's shared. If this journey through the snow-laden villages and star-dusted courts lit a spark of wonder in you, why not pass the flame along? Your subscription is like a lantern in the window, guiding us to tell more hidden tales. A 5-star rating is a shard of the first morning, helping this story shine for other listeners. And down in the comments, where the villagers gather to share their gossip, well, that's where the real magic happens. Tell us, what would you have traded at the Midwinter market? Which path would you have taken at the frozen marsh? Or perhaps, what impossible thing would you ask for, to test a heart? We're all listening. Until the next tale whispers on the wind, thank you for listening.